Tony, after I say hello to everybody, I'll also mute myself, but then I might stop in every now and then to ask you a question or ask a question at the end. And I'm just going to assume we're on now and say hello to everybody this evening. Welcome to Poetry is Normal Presents at the Normal Public Library. Tonight, Poetry is Normal presents Tony Brewer, who's actually in Bloomington, Indiana. We are in Normal, Illinois, which is Twin Cities with Bloomington, Illinois. And there have been a few confusions in my past life when a bus or a train took me to the wrong state. but it's nice to be unified in this way now. Poetry is Normal Presents is our guest poet series, which is supported by our Normal Public Library Foundation, which helps us with our programming, and we're very grateful to the foundation. This series brings you published poets, practicing poets who are out there in the world, and we get to meet a bunch of different poets. And it happens every other month on the third Tuesday, and it alternates with our open mic, Poetry is Normal. So if you are listening tonight and you would like to join us at our open mic, it is now back in person, but is also a hybrid event. And you can come in February 21st, 7 to 8 p.m. Central Time. You can register for this and join us by Zoom, or you can come to the library. We'll be in the library cafe. And then in March 21st, we'll have another guest poet on YouTube Live. So if you're joining us and anything interrupts you tonight, we are broadcasting live on the Normal Public Library YouTube channel, where this event will be archived, and you can come back and listen to Tony again. And you can also leave any comments or questions there, and a little bit later in the program, Lindsay, who's helping us with the broadcast and in the Zoom room, will tell us anything that's going on there, but I'm sure I'll have some questions. Now I'd like to introduce Tony Brewer, and then he can tell us anything else he wants us to know about himself or the poems that he'll read tonight. Let me give you his bio. Tony Brewer is a poet and audio artist from Bloomington, Indiana, as I said. He is executive director of the spoken word stage at the 4th Street Festival and co-producer of the Writers Guild Spoken Word series. He's published 8 books, including Homunculus, Pity for Sale, and Scythurism. Hope I said that right. I think it's a word meaning a whispering or rustling sound, like susurration. Tony has been offering poetry on demand at coffee houses, museums, cemeteries, churches, bars, and art and music festivals for over a decade. I hope we'll hear more about that. And he's a frequent collaborator with experimental music and field recording collective Urban Deer. You can find out more about Tony at TonyBrewer71blogspot.com, where you can also find all of his books and samples of his poems and more. And so, Tony, I'm going to turn it over to you, but I might write down some questions for you. So yes, we always love to hear how you got that poem, anything you want to tell us. Tony Brewer.
Thanks, Kathleen. Thanks for having me. And thanks to Lindsay, too, working behind the scenes. I do similar behind the scenes work, too. So thank you for being here. I thought I would read a little bit from pretty much everything I've done. And then I've also got a couple of manuscripts in process. I want to try and read some new stuff. I want to try and read a few poems on demand that I've made over the years. That's one of the manuscripts that I'm working on. I started doing that in, I think, 2010, and I have amassed somewhere north of 700 poems that I've made for people over the years. And so I've been slowly transcribing them and collecting pictures, the few pictures that I have of them, and trying to cobble them into some sort of manuscript. And I'm slowly closing in on that. So I've been, picking my favorites. So yeah, I'm gonna try and read a little bit of everything, I got. So I thought I would start with something from Pity for Sale, which came out in February of 22. From Gasconade Press, which is a great small press in Missouri. My good friends John Dorsey and Jason Reberg run Gasconade Press, and they put this out. Very happy with this one. So I thought I would start. I'm going to read a few poems from this first, and I thought I would start with the title poem, "Pity for Sale," which I wrote. Let's see. I think I wrote this right before, or maybe right after Lawrence Ferlinghetti died, and it's sort of inspired by his poem "Pity the Nation." So, Pity for Sale. After Ferlinghetti, after Gibran. Pity the bee who has no country, its fuzzy, swollen appetite and hardwired love of candy. Pity the window, gladly accepting so many waves of heat and hand, fogged with condensation of desire. Pity the vegetable in its untouchable packet, disguised as itty-bitty seeds that are mere possibilities. Pity the failed backup and make it new. Pity the ambulance so lonely it stalks my next-door neighbor twice this year alone. Alone. Pity the billionaires in love with zeros. No, fuck those clowns, right in the zero. Pity the worker who identifies with a king. Pity the tree dragged down by sweet honeysuckle, the red buds pinking the woods, telling us it is time. Time. Pity the time it takes to feel, the time it takes to unfeel, to unlearn, to unlove, to unseal. Pity our ranks and forms, a slot for everyone, when we all would be better off marked other. My country, 'tis not insane, but copes horrendously. Sweet land, sweet liberty, ask any busy bee. I wrote a lot of the poems in this book during the first year of COVID. Um, I'd say probably probably the majority of them. I think I wrote in 2020, and I do a poem a day, like a lot of poets do in April. Write a poem a day in April, and a lot of those poems ended up in here too. And I believe this was one of them. This is "They Always Come Back." Birds first. Parliament of crows in stooped trees, enshrouding the railroad tracks as graceful plastic bags tumbleweed the buds. Geese in crooked V's spelled across a valiant sky, honking like lonesome traffic. Raptors hunting downtown mice, sunbathing in the unsafe gray. Herons peg-legged in the campus crick like canaries ruffling in a coal mine. 2 by 2, mammals emerge, possums ambling across barren streets with relaxed perma-sneers, rabbits humping openly in the side yard as grass worms love around them. All emboldened by our absence and the suddenly clearer air returning for us to admire is a lie spring spreads like a virus. Dolphins always swim in Venice. Coyotes have always dogged the steps of urban deer. Chickadees have always harassed me with their black cat complaints. Why this house here? Why these windows mirroring this sky? Peeping at my window, not asking for a truce. This, when I wrote this one, this was not particularly topical, but it's kind of become topical in the last year or so. Kind of, at least the title is. But this is Elon Musk is not vegan, but Teslas are. We rounded a turn, and there sat a deer with broken back legs in the middle of the highway, his eyes rolling back in pain and distress. The phone tree goes from me to animal control to sheriff to his brother in law, who arrives in a camo truck, grabs a handful of antler, and drags the buck into the ditch. We did not wait around, but there are only two ways this could end: bullet to the head or a slashed jugular, all that morality trailing off into tall grass, a quick, shallow pool gone in a day or two. Hunter gets meat, highway stays clear. Some believe we live in a computer simulation. Don't tell Bambi. And for the time being, this will be the last one from this book. And this is, I guess this is about trying to get out of the Midwest. This is called Oh, Bury Me Not. I cannot escape the corn, nor walls for shadow rest. Red skies at night when always, always golden rays. The drivers laugh passing by, defeat in the wind when we are winning. Fields whisper like cities shout, long nights wherever is home. Men, permanently boys, shrugged into father coats, touch bombs before dropping microcosms too large to hold skin and ink. And corn gets put in everything. The dust explodes. Pick a season that's cruel. Its pleasant memory as landscape shields a strangled sob. The cut leaves growing space for pressed humanity needs to live, so one man can enjoy the quality of light upon such stricken ears as heaven conjures its own myth of endlessness shattered by a fence.
Hey, Tony,
Yes.
can I ask a
Yes.
question now?
Please do. Yeah, please.
You mentioned a lot of the poems from that book are from April Poem a Day efforts.
Yeah.
Were you just letting the day itself produce the poem, or did you work with a group and respond to prompts?
I've been doing the poem a day thing. I actually started doing poem a day in November many years ago during NaNoWriMo, the National Novel Writing Month. And then I've learned that poets were doing a poem a day in April. So I started doing in April too. So I do a poem a day in November and a poem a day in April. And I just kind of make up my own prompts. I sometimes just kind of just let it open myself up to the universe or something like that. But I keep lists of things I want to write about, interesting lines, topics that occur to me, news stories, that sort of thing. Just current events. I mean, at the time there were a lot of current events to be writing about, and certainly a lot of them have this sort of interior feel because I was, like everybody else, kind of hunkered down in March and April. In the early part, everyone was really kind of locked down in a way, not really going out, and it was still spring. So yeah, that's typically where I don't really have a writing group that I work with. I do a lot of work with the Writers Guild and do a lot of readings, but don't do too much composition work with other folks. I just kind of maintain my own list of things I want to write about, just things I think are interesting.
Yeah, and I heard in your poem "Where All the Animals Are Coming Out" that phrase "urban deer," and was realizing that's the name of the music group. Yeah,
right. That name has been rattling around for a long time, and I kind of saddled the group with it at one point. So it's funny because urban deer are a problem in Bloomington. there are parts of town, especially around campus, where you really have to be careful when you're driving because you'll hit them because they just kind of they're almost domesticated. They just kind of hang out in the street and they eat people's flowers, and people trip over fawns, like newborn deer in their backyard, and it's kind of a problem. And I'll never forget. I think I think it was in Bloomington. I think it was here. I think there was a newspaper headline that said, urban deer are a menace to the to urban living or something like that. So they're dangerous too. It's like those dangerous urban deer that are you can't seem to get rid of them.
Yeah.
But that poem was there was a I'd read there were people were talking about how um, that the dolphins had come back to Venice, and that there were all these animals and I even noticed in my little plot here in my backyard that it just seemed like there were a ton of rabbits. But there's always tons of rabbits in the spring. It's just there was a little bit less activity, and so they were just a little bolder. It seemed like, but I had read too that the thing about the dolphins coming back to Venice, that's actually wasn't a COVID related thing. That just happens. They just do that, when the tide is right. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
I wanted to move now to, you mentioned earlier, and you did a great job pronouncing Scythianism. So I want to read a couple of poems out of that. Scythianism is, it is the sound of wind in the trees and rustling leaves. And I'd never heard it before, but I wrote these poems in I think it was October of 2020, and I did a reading outdoors in a park for the city of Bloomington, and there was a naturalist that came, and we sort of traded back and forth. I would read some poems about leaves, and she would talk about leaves. And people that came to the reading would do rubbings. People would go walk in the park and find leaves and bring them back and identify the trees that they were from. I'd read some more poems about leaves, and I got an opportunity to. This is from Last Lights Press down in Evansville, and I said, "Hey, I would like to put those into a chapbook because that was just a fun little project, right? I think it's maybe 12 or 13 poems about leaves that end up in this little chapbook. So under the title Scythianism, and the poems are pretty much all untitled. Poems are all untitled, so I'm just going to read a couple of them. If you burn them in a pile, they leap up into the night. As kids, we owned the town on a certain October night. Until their light goes away, leaves the color of early night. Geese making their way, but crows roost in trees at night. Veins in trees where leaves were up against the pale moon night. White noise of static and pop, water rushing over rocks in the night. Wood fire smoke coils up like rope, smell of words and dirt and night. Weather becomes strange, forbidding and inky some nights, but alive with laughter of leaves, murmuration of skulls at night. No matter what, the day finds itself answering to night. And then the last poem in the book. Did you sit in golden rays today and forget about the rest of the world? Plastered like a leaf to a window, did the light reveal veins and ribs where weather creeps in? The neatly trimmed is overgrown. The old ones are with us still. The rest of the world on both sides of the veil, insulated from seasons, has hard rules about the phase after this one. Moments long gone are with us, whistling like wind, crackling bent branches, arcing against watercolor sky. One traveler among many is leaving the wooded sanctuary, twisting toward who knows where, leaves like wings of pages open, illuminate, and close. So that's that, Scythurism from Last Light's Press. I wanted to read one from my book Homunculus. We got a thing for weird words, I guess. Uh, Perhaps Latin and or Greek word. I think homunculus might be Greek. I think Scythurism might also be Greek. Yeah, I like weird words, especially words that have a lot going on. And homunculus came out in 2019, and it's by Dos Madres Press. And homunculus is an old term. Homunculus is sort of like an origin of man word. The idea back in the days of alchemy, trying to turn lead into gold. A homunculus was one idea for how the brain worked. Was a homunculus was this little person that sits inside your head and is kind of watching everything play out. And that was one idea for how human consciousness worked. The idea too that I can't think of the term for it, but there was the idea that in human sperm that there was a fully formed human being in a sperm cell, and so there was like this little tiny, and it was called a homunculus or homunculi, like a tiny little person in a sperm cell that would grow into this 6 foot tall person or whatever. Homunculus is also any man-made creature that's kind of cobbled together, like a golem in not Lord of the Rings golem, but Golem, like in Jewish folklore, like a man-made automaton, or Frankenstein. Frankenstein is a homunculus, something that's sort of cobbled together from different parts. And my favorite homunculus interpretation is in psychology. You've probably seen in psychology textbooks, they have this thing called a homunculus, where if you map the different parts of the brain to the different parts of the body that that part of the brain controls, you end up with this kind of weirdly shaped, weirdly scaled, because your fingertips are much more sensitive than, say, your shoulder, or your lips have a lot more receptors in them than other parts of your face. So you have this weird being that has giant hands and fingers and huge lips and big eyes, but then tiny little shoulders that can be, it's just kind of a bizarre looking. There's all kinds of interpretations for what homunculus, troll, yeah. And so that's kind of what the book ended up being, just kind of a collection of different, not necessarily persona poems, but different voices coming at you with a lot of different ideas about truth, and how you should be observing and perceiving the world. So that said, this poem is based on yet another thing, but this is a National Geographic article from a bunch of years ago that had a baby on the cover, and the first line of the poem was the kind of the caption of the photo. It's called "Hey Baby." I met a baby the other day scientists say will live to be 150, and I thought, that's good. Scientists don't often express maternal instincts around the laboratory. If anything, they are paternal, always expecting results. A generation of babies waddling around petri dishes while some beard in a lab coat weighs their poopies. Yes, there is a grant for that. I thought their optimism odd because babies are basically happy or sad, and even after a range of emotions occurs to them, they are still prone to drowning in mop buckets or anaphylactic shock from smashing bumblebees with their tiny fists as they crawl unattended in the side yard. I'm sure the scientists meant under ideal conditions, this baby will grow 80 feet tall, photosynthesize, and crush terrorist babies beneath its chubby heel. You can't trust anything the media says about science these days. They want to sell something when that poor old baby only wants to retire by 50 and buy a yacht and sail around visiting old baby buddies, slathered with sunblock, filled with lament over all the people he has outlived, his parents. But wait, science babies' parents were cells who split and again, and so on. Ageless babies born of divorce, born because of separation. And suddenly we have won. We can become anything, become anyone. As long as a beard and a lab coat stands ready to measure the results, you too can grow buzzing, fuzzy-legged cherubim pollinating apple orchards and cornfields alike. Heaven is a place where babies never age, and who can tell if only new babies live to 150? No one thinks about old babies but babies. Is hell where young babies dwell? I'm not allowed in that room of the laboratory. I snuck in there once, but all that crying and the wailing and the outstretched intubated arms. Someone wrote down, I cried too. Then they escorted me out of the building and I haven't been back. Moving to Tabletop Anxieties and Sweet Decay, which is a split chapbook I did with my friend, my good friend Tim Hierding, who is a great poet from Evansville, and this was put out by Roaring Junior Press. My good friend Tim Tarkelly out there in Kansas put this out. And it's a split chapbook, so Tim is the Tabletop Anxieties half, while I am the Sweet Decay half. So I wanted to read one from this that I like quite a bit. And this is, this was another, you probably read about this, Kathleen, you probably heard about this too, but this was about book preservation, a poem about book preservation. This is called Curators of a Sort. They rescinded the order to wear gloves when handling rare books because they make them hard to hold. Hot and sweaty, the curators caress as filthy as skin, even behind cotton, conserving patina like a monk. Washing your hands is just as good. Gloves, they determine, decrease the ability to feel and increase risk of rip or drop. We rely on the tactility and manual dexterity of bare hands to make us persevere, want to feel the fragile edges of each other and lift friable ink from pages with our own nervous oils. No false security barrier, not butler's hands, Mickey Mouse minstrel hands. Strip the plastic off grandma's couch and let's get nasty on the doilies someday. I'm joking now, but librarians do it in stacks. And once the gloves are off, we'll never wear them again.
I like your humor. The dark humor and sadness of the baby poem was still washing over me. But yes, the gloves. I used to work at the Newberry Library in Chicago in the rare books room. All of the patrons needed to be wearing gloves to handle, right, and only pencils. So yeah.
And I read recently that they said, well, actually, you need to be handling them because otherwise, when you're turning pages, even if you're being very careful, you can't tell how hard you're holding it. And actually, a good friend of mine used to work here at the Lilly Library on campus here at Bloomington, Rare Books Library, and she destroyed, because she was wearing gloves, she dropped some ancient codex, some ancient, and it just crumbled. It crumbled in her hand. She couldn't tell how hard she was holding it, and right, it just kind of fell apart in her hands, and she dropped it, and it's just gone.
Ooh, scary.
I remember too. There was that Johnny Depp movie. I think it's called the Ninth Gate? It's the one where he's a rare books dealer, and I can remember seeing that in the theater. And all of my librarian friends were freaking out because he's smoking over these rare books and he's not wearing gloves and he's just like riffling through these pages. So but I guess you can kind of do that now, or at
Yeah.
least, you don't have to be quite so careful. I wanted to read some poems on demand from that manuscript. That I've been, like I said, I've been making poems for people for about 12 years, and I've amassed a pretty good collection of them. And they're all over the place because depending on the event, I might over an 8-hour period, I might write 20 or 25 poems for people, and I might write something for a 5-year-old, and then write something for a 90-year-old, write something for a couple, write something for someone who's really sad, write something for someone who's really happy. Um, Someone came up to me and asked for a poem, and she had literally just broken up with her girlfriend. Like she had literally just broken up with her girlfriend, and then saw this opportunity to get a poem made, and came over and kind of spilled her guts and made a poem for her. So people get really personal and intimate. Surprisingly so. It surprises me um, how much people are willing to share, what intimate details people are willing to share in a very public open space, because I'm not sequestered in my sweaty little poet's garret. I'm out in sunshine, um, you know in this big public space, and people will reveal things about themselves because they want you to make a poem for them. I always say too that I think the ones I'm going to read, especially, I think they're pretty good. But I think good or bad, I don't think that matters so much. What really matters is that you're going to do it. What really matters is that they come up and ask you, and that you actually complete it. And I do it pretty quick too. I've gotten pretty quick over the years, so that I can make one in like 10 or 15 minutes, which is pretty good. So anyway, I'm gonna read a few of these. They're all very short. They tend to be like 20 or 30 lines or so. And I have the dates from when they were all from. This first one was from an event called Affair of the Arts here in Bloomington from August 10th, 2021. And the interesting thing about this one too is I usually work with a crew. I usually work with more than one person, and sometimes it gets really busy, and sometimes you can't. You might do the interview with the person, but you don't end up actually writing the poem, and that's what happened in this case. Someone else talked to the person, and then gave me a one-word prompt, and said, "Can you work with that?" And I said, "Sure, I'll make a poem about that." So this is called the title was the prompt. Tea Party of Grief. It steeps in the belly of the pot as it brews and stews, keeping you up or knocking you out, depending on what leaves. Some sadness has a limit, who has a seat at table. Some leaves a whole life unstable, unable to see a whole life like a mask that cannot be removed, only grown accustomed to. Soaking into the psyche like rain seeps into skin, surviving but wet with regret or merely damp with memory, dunked over and over in it till the tea grows tepid, is drunk, and the guests go home full, but you're still here, left to clean up. So this one, I write a lot of poems about pets. A lot of poems about pets. So here's a short one from First Thursday event on campus at IU in the Arts Plaza from September 7th, 2017. This is Maximum Dog. Oh, you butt to mutt of tongue and sausage gut, wallowing on couches and impossible to make do anything unridiculous or properly dog-like. More old man stink than puff of pup, and only once were you ever told no, because it just doesn't matter now, does it? I do not remember the prompt for this one, but this is from a little while ago. This is from the 4th Street Festival here in Bloomington. This is from September 3rd, 2016. This is What Would Thoreau Do? These are days the pond was made for, the isolated mind, like a skipped stone, riding its own echo, then sinking. The safe space of the forest, unencumbered, disinterested. The fertile earth, perfect and unable to vote. Eternal outsider inside us all. So I'm going to do three more of these. This is from an event in Madison, Indiana called Poet Palooza from April 22nd, 2016. This is the botany of you. With a sharp yank where stem meets earth is how we move from the cradle to the pot. Such concern for drainage and proper placement to achieve optimal natural light, or kept alive in a hot greenhouse under timed fake lamps, how we feed ourselves, escape ourselves, this gray, root-bound world. This is one that, this was a commission for a good friend of mine named Kelly Wow, who is a glass artist. And this was really fun. I like doing commission. She's a good friend, and I like doing commissions for friends, definitely, because you can be a little deeper, I guess, because you know each other a little bit better. But it's still written in the same mode. We had a conversation about her work as a glass artist, and she wanted something that sort of encompassed her, like why she does it, why she likes to do it, and what she gets out of it. And this was from August 1st, 2021, is when I wrote it. The Glass Works. The reason for getting up, become the vessel of you, neck pulled up like a new soul rising into a bright morning. The dopa hit of ooh, ah, of peer praise. That's awesome. Cool as a cooling hand form shaped, into which is dusted you. No metal pigment or artist's figment, but another wayward being, contained momentarily, empty yet filled with purpose and fragile peace of mind. And then one more of these that was very recent. This is one of the most recent. This may be the most recent, or one of the most recent. This is from September 2nd, 2022. And this is from a First Friday art walk here in Bloomington. And the prompt was the James Webb telescope. Something about this amazing new telescope that we have. This is called Seeing Things. The tree said, "Eat this from my body, for it is knowledge and it is good." Okay, so take a picture. It'll last longer. 1,000,000 years, 1,000,000 billion, in fact. Side eye of Jupiter, or the wound at the center of every galaxy. We're just winking along here in our tininess with new and improved eyes, never meant to see some things so clearly, bringing the mysterious distance into sharp, relentless focus.
These are just delightful. Can I ask you
Yeah,
more about
please.
the mechanics of these
Sure.
poems on demand? When you're at an event, someone comes to you and you have a conversation.
Keep going.
Do you write it for them on the spot and they walk away with it and you keep a copy of it? Or
so typically, so what happens is, we ask. Well, here, let me respond with a poem. Like I said, I'm there with a crew, and so I'm not always the person, um, that talks to them first. But eventually, we, get down to brass tacks and say, what kind of poem do you want? And we talk for maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, but not very long. And then, I make them go away, um, so I have a little space. And I might have to not start that poem right away, but you take another one, take another order, and occasionally, if it's a really busy event, I might have four or five in the queue that I'm working on, and I'm kind of working on them all at the same time, which makes things interesting. Um, and then, I usually was going to show you. This is from an event where if I'm making a poem for someone, I don't have any in this. Oh, I don't have any in this notebook, but basically, I'll write on my notebook on one side, on one column of one page. I'll make all my notes while the person is talking, and I try and just get people to talk and talk. Say as much as you want, um, and then they go away, and then I make a draft very quickly, usually like 5 or 10 minutes. Draft something, and then in writing it, in transcribing it from the notebook page to the typewriter, I type it up on a typewriter for them. That gives me an opportunity to edit. So I kind of work in some time for myself, even though it's that whole thing is maybe 20 minutes, including talking to them and getting them to come up and all that stuff. Um, but it's important to make them go away. So I have a little bit of private, a little bit of time to myself, so I can have some time to think about it and have that time to edit things. But this is called How This Works, and this is from another First Thursday at the Arts Plaza from September 7th, 2017. I ask if you want a poem. You say yes. Give me a topic, maybe a form or word, something you feel. In 10 to 15 minutes, I'll type one up. There may be minor typos, and read it to you and give it to you on a lovely card. You give me your reaction and a small donation and then leave. Then I do another one from someone else.
Terrific. Yes, so that answers my question.
I could have just read that instead of said the whole thing. But,
yeah.
And the big event that I do every year is the 4th Street Festival, and that's a 2-day festival, Labor Day weekend, down here in Bloomington, with about 80 art booths of various artists. And then the Writers Guild down here, I produce the spoken word stage. And then we also have a Poetry on Demand booth. And I'll have a fleet of maybe 6 poets working at once, and all day, both days. And I think last year we made about 130 poems over the course of a weekend for people. So it's a lot of fun, and everybody's banging away on typewriters. So it's a real show.
Yay! Thank you.
Sure, you're very welcome. Okay, let me see what I've got. I've got about 15 minutes left. Let me do this one. This is from Hot Type Cold Read, which was out by Chatterhouse Press, which is here in Indianapolis, 2013. And this is about a trip I took to Maine back in 2009. This is called Down East. Somewhere around here, Paul Stuckey started a radio station that has played Puff the Magic Dragon 24/7 since 1968, except for break-ins from Democracy Now! And the Hightower Report. People from Boston are called massholes. Limp shedders in a convenience store tank too long are yesterday's pound. Ask a local, lived here all your life? And he'll answer, not yet. Such happy yellow rubber trousers with booties attached and suspenders extending out of a hang-down mustache as dark and downturned as the mouth underneath. He's a watercolor of a wharf, stacking cages and banding claws, and thinking of his manicured ex-wife's painted nails and mouth. How she hated his Irish music, and boy, that was a deal breaker. He could have just not let her get that close instead of running all the way to Maine to escape after the divorce. But the sun isn't hiding when it doesn't show its face. A milky pearl in clam-colored skies. Here comes a squall. Snap. That's how the weather works here. A rock-bound smugness saying, "You just don't know the world like we do." Thumbs under suspenders like tongues on long vowels dying at the back of the throat. A fish slides easily through the hand until the fins prick like quills when you try to hold it fast and scale and clean and gut it. He prefers claws and armor boiling in a pot and putting up a fight with a hammer and tongs and a long buttery fork. Imagine trying to live here without synthetics, all oilskin and sealskin and real skin against wet wool dried over a smoky fire, and in another time, blubber. Fat people rich, now fat people poor. The boat is not his life. It's got a name, like a wife, and he loves every catch he dumps on her deck, writhing like a sequin dress she's not clean enough to wear. So it just lays there, all pretty on the bed. A radio's the only thing still running when a nor'easter knocks the power out. He cranks it like a phonograph, and out comes Elvis Costello, pretending he's Pete Seeger, doing a terrible Burl Ives. That tremolo wheezing forth, he'd almost rather hear the news. And off the coast, a foghorn sounding all night, all year, though no one lives there, ever since the keeper passed away. Remote controlled since 1958. He can tune a violin by it. G sharp. And the waves lapping the granite beach clean are whole rests. Let's see. Getting down to it, I think. So I wanted to read this one. So I'm down to some of the newer stuff. New material. This is where we at? Oh yeah. So yeah, I wanted to read this one. This is a short one. This is kind of a poem on demand, but not really because he didn't demand it. He didn't ask for it. I just left this behind. I've been spending some time. I've been spending parts of my summers at the Osage Arts Community in Bell, Missouri, the past couple of years, and it's a great community. There's a couple of poets that live there full time. Actually, John Dorsey and Jason Reberg, the folks that run Gasconade Press, live there full time. That's where I met them, and it was in Bell. And so I've been going there to do to work on their letterpresses. I've actually been doing some letterpress work, and Jason was my roommate in one of the houses there this last time, and I left this behind for him. This is based on true events. This was written October 2nd, 2022. This is The Guy in the Clutch T-shirt. Somewhere between spicy IPA and some flavorless Schlitz, a car is born idling, both feet ready to burn rubber, both pedals options on the constant road. And the voice is a burnout popped out of granny gear all the way to redline, back to idle of repose. Can we start already? Or is this just where it gets interesting? Life by the metaphor, racing stop to stop, the illusion of automatic when it's all goddamn work, only the transmission does it for you. In the barrel chest of a mean street machine, running like a mouth full of poem and spite, racing and winning, so far ahead, sometimes it feels like living in last place. And this one also was written while I was there out there in Bell. And I'm from a small town in Indiana. Bloomington's not really a small town. It feels like a small town sometimes, but it's not. But I'm from a real small town. of about 1,000 people here in Indiana, and every small town has this kind of culture. I think larger towns do too, but it's maybe less. It's less visible. Um, but in small little, kind of bombed out Midwestern towns, like the town I grew up in, and a little bit like Bell too, they've all got this. They've all got truck culture, um, and it just surprised me that this was there. But it shouldn't have because it's everywhere. This is called Fabulous Princess Trucks. On dainty neon wheels, they glide, tractionless, on skinny tires across the gravel lot beside the grain elevator. Fairy godmother conjured carriages, miraculously dirt free and rolling coal that could smell like jasmine. But it's just good old clean coal. And the air is thick with diesel clatter. Each coiffed, manly royal steps from their spotless 4x4 conveyance, ruggedly tousled and ready for a night of quarter-mile cruising. Their love of ritual pageantry, the showcase of their art, just past sundown, like first stars at twilight. Their engine bays still grimy, motors running rich to smoke and grumble haughtily in contrast to the outer sheen. Old lady smokers, fresh from the beauty parlor, bouffants wrapped like custom fender flares, who never figured out how to leave this town or why when they owned the humble runway Tuesday nights right here. Uh, I think I've got. I think I could do two more. I think I got time for a couple more. This is a sad one, but I like this one. Um, this is from my good friend, another fantastic poet from Evansville, who died in a car accident last year. Um, oh man, I mean he ran the Evansville art scene for probably 30 years. Bill Severn was just an amazing painter and poet and traveling poet, dangerous performance poet. He was in a music poetry group called Shakespeare's Monkey, and they played all over the country. Huge regard for him. Friends everywhere, friends all over the country, and just died in a stupid car accident. This is called Candy Mountain for Poets for Bill Severn. The ditchweed is super kind. Cops are all well read. City fountains spew Cabernet. You still wind up dead. Smoke breaks count as meditation. Well dressed is a state of mind. Chapbooks are legal tender. You still wind up dead. No monuments or class fees. The weather is always beautiful or beautifully glum. You still wind up dead. Readers know your best work. Readings are celebrations. Every road an invitation. You still wind up dead. Glaciers are still frozen. The sky's not full of lead. Everyone gets to be somewhere. You still wind up dead. There's always a party cooking in a church where no one prays. Every poem breaks God's heart. You still wind up dead. The infinite becomes graspable. I am every grain of sand. All hair comes with flowers. Being alive is work. The whiskey flows like water from rock deep in earth. Printing's free, pens never dry. Outside doesn't touch too hard anymore. You still wind up dead.
I'm so sorry. Thank you for that
Thank
poem. Sorry for the loss of your friend. That
Yeah,
line, when you say in your poem, every poem breaks God's heart. That, yeah.
yeah. Bill was a force of nature. I mean, he really was, and he published some, but mostly his thing was performing. And he had a series of poetry series that he ran in Evansville for, I mean, like I said, like 20 or 25 years. He was always, in the heart of the art scene in Evansville. It was crazy, and yeah, we had a wake at his reading series for him. that people came from other states to just to share and read something, to be there with him. So thanks, I appreciate that. So this will be our last one. This is the last poem in Pity for Sale, and this also was I call them Rona poems. There, if you come through my website, one of the many things there's a YouTube playlist. So the April of 2020, I do a poem a day. I don't always post them. Most of the times I don't. I just write them down and maybe edit some of them later. But because of lockdown and because of the situation, I felt compelled to actually make a video of each one of them. And I didn't always do it every day because sometimes I just didn't feel like being on camera that day. But I did complete all 30 poems for April, and this was one of the poems that made it there. This is called Our Origin. Thanks again to Normal Public Library for having me, and thank you, Kathleen, for being here, and thanks, Lindsay, for working behind the scenes. This is called Our Origin. Tell me a story. Not how your day has been, that you cleaned the cat box, took out the trash after clearing the refrigerator of dead, uneaten food. House spirits care for those details, and the piles of spite it takes to motivate your ass to chore away a Saturday. I want your legends and myths, not the lie-consuming cycle requiring a ladder to properly tuck away, or the rumor slouching down Maine. Sirens going whoop whoop through the intersection have it cammed for their protection. Will we be stranded on this rock forever? I remember how to make a raft from a movie, and the movie in my head where Dad was there to tell me how and do it all himself. Where fate got slammed, a pool formed. I filled it with neat colored rocks I found along the riverbank. Not naturally occurring, a plot, some action, and a truth. The eyes glaze over because telling is no substitute for a show, reduced in this textual world to merely unbelievably enthralling. Back into the stars you go, up, up, into the cloud, with ringing ears from the chorus glory. Nothing need be foretold, but save us from the random, with singular vision and undeniable breath. Leave nothing out, and make it good. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We've been listening to Tony Brewer, his wonderful poems from a whole bunch of different books, his poems on demand. It's just been really nice. As soon as you referred to the cat in this last poem, your cat appeared on the stairs. That was really perfect timing.
Yeah, the district manager likes to, make sure I'm doing things right. I'm surprised that it took her this long into the Zoom to show up, because usually as soon as I start talking, she thinks I'm calling to her. So she's got a little towel right here by the screen. So.
Well, this has been delightful and moving. I want to check in with Lindsay and see if there have been any questions from anyone listening. And I thank you for answering my questions as we went along. Lindsay?
No questions on YouTube.
Okay, thank you. It's just been wonderful having you.
Thanks, Kathleen. I appreciate it.
Sure. We very much appreciate you being with us from Bloomington, Indiana. And the coincidence of, if anybody joined us in progress, it's Bloomington, Indiana, not Bloomington, Illinois, that Tony was referring to. And I feel like we've all learned a lot tonight about
my cat,
about your cat, about poems, and this whole idea of poems on demand as well.
Yeah,
they would just arise from engaging with people who are open to that. And thank you so much. One of your another of your chapbooks is with Plan B Press.
Yeah.
A friend of mine has a book there, Voice Lessons,
Okay,
Paulette
yeah.
Beat. So that was a nice coincidence. But
Right, yeah.
yeah, thank you so much. And I want to say again, Poetry is Normal Presents is supported by our Normal Public Library Foundation. It happens every other month at the library or in this fashion, virtually. And in the alternating months, we have an open mic. So any of you can come back and join us for the open mic on February 21st. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for broadcasting for us and arranging things for us here in the Zoom room. Thank you, Tony Brewer, so much for sharing your poems with us.
Thanks again, Kathleen. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Lindsay.
Yes,
Thanks for
thank
being
you.
here.
Sure. Good night, all.
Good night.
Bye.
Well, thank you, Tony.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Thanks for having
Lindsay.
me. That was fun. That was great.
Yeah.
I liked your question. Thanks for asking questions too.
Sure.